The email came in at exactly 2:30 a.m., just as the cabin lights dimmed and the Sao Paulo skyline vanished beneath the clouds. Subject line termination notice effective immediately for a few seconds. I couldn't process what I was reading. I kept blinking, thinking maybe the screen hadn't fully loaded. But it had. It was all there in perfect clarity. My name, my role, and the sentence that made my heart drop through the floor. Your employment with Ventron Technologies has been terminated, effective immediately. Your access has been revoked. Please do not return to any company property. No call, no meeting, no thank you. Just this sterile final notice. And the sender, Grayson Hart, the CEO himself, the very man who shook my hand 2 weeks ago and said, "You're the only one I trust to pull this off. Marin." I looked around the cabin. Everyone else was asleep, curled into their business class pods with eye masks and wine-stained pillows. I was alone with the hum of the jet engines and a silence that suddenly felt louder than anything I'd ever heard. 10 days, 3 continents, Tokyo for initial alignment, London for compliance, Sao Paulo for the close. I hadn't just participated in this deal. I'd built it. 3 global giants. 1 synchronized move to Ventron's cloud system. 1.5 billion across 5 years. And now I didn't even work there anymore. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not rage, not yet, just disbelief. Like someone had pulled the ground out from under me while I was still mid-step. I stared at the laptop in front of me for another full minute. Then without saying a word, I reached under the seat and pulled out a second laptop. Matte black, unbranded, and encrypted. The one no one at Ventron knew existed. I opened it, logged in, watched the screen blink awake, and I smiled. They thought this was the end of my journey. They had no idea I'd already started another one. 3 weeks earlier, I was standing in that same glass-paneled boardroom on the 32nd floor, watching grown men scramble to save a collapsing $400 million contract. The client, a notoriously difficult European consortium, had walked out mid-negotiation. Legal was in panic. Finance was pointing fingers, and the VP of Global Sales had nearly burst into tears. I didn't wait to be asked. I just walked in, grabbed the abandoned proposal from the table, rewrote the core structure in 20 minutes, and requested a private call with the consortium's head delegate. By the next morning, the contract was not only salvaged, it was expanded to include 2 new territories. That wasn't my first miracle for Ventron. It was just the most recent one after the win. There was a champagne toast in the executive lounge. People clapped. Grayson gave one of his hollow grins and said, "Now that's the kind of leadership we need at the next level." Someone even slipped a promotion rumor into the hallway chatter. Executive Vice President, Global Strategy. The title sounded ridiculous, overblown, and overdue. Because I wasn't just a closer, I was the firewall. The one they called when the men in suits couldn't land the plane. I'd negotiated with energy giants, telecom empires, and foreign ministries. I spoke 4 languages, kept 2 phones, and lived out of airports. For 7 years. I made Ventron look far more stable than it really was. And still the title never came. A week after the champagne, I was told the promotion was in progress. Then under review, then silence. At first I thought I was being paranoid. Maybe they were restructuring. Maybe HR was slow. Maybe, for once, it wasn't personal. Then I overheard it. It was during a board lunch. I was in the adjoining conference room preparing a portfolio. The sliding door had been left slightly open. I mean, come on. One board member chuckled. "Marin's brilliant, but let's be honest, she walks into a room and no other guy wants to speak. She dominates every pitch," another replied. "Yeah, she's not exactly EVP material, she's more field ops, like I was some glorified negotiator they could fly around and then forget about." That moment stuck with me longer than the missed promotion, because the truth was clear. They didn't want to promote me. They wanted to contain me. Too confident, too polished, too many wins that couldn't be redirected to someone else. I was the one they called when the deals needed saving, but never the one they wanted at the table when credit was handed out. I stood there in that empty conference room holding the portfolio I'd spent weeks building and realized something bitter but undeniable. It wasn't about merit, it was about threat perception. The quiet ones got elevated, the loud ones, especially the ones like me, got sidelined. And yet I didn't storm out, I didn't raise hell. I returned to my desk, booked 3 back-to-back international flights, and got to work on the biggest deal of the company's history. Because if they wouldn't give me the title, I'd build one of my own. It's funny how betrayal rarely arrives with a loud crash. Sometimes it drips in like a slow leak unnoticed at first until you're standing in a room ankle-deep in water wondering when it started. A year ago, Mallory Hart was in trouble. She had just been hired in Daventuron as a strategic advisor, a vague title padded by Legacy Grayson's daughter. She had no technical background, barely 2 years of corporate experience, and one very large mistake, an unauthorized data transfer during a client demo that accidentally exposed personal information from a pilot partner in Singapore. It should have been a public scandal. The legal team panicked, the marketing department froze, and Grayson. He called me. "Clean it up quietly," he said over the phone. She didn't mean to. She just didn't know. I didn't argue. I pulled every connection I had, worked around the clock to contain the leak, and spun the story into a beta testing glitch that never made it past trade blogs. I even took the media call myself so her name wouldn't appear in any press notes. No one thanked me. I didn't ask for it. I told myself it was loyalty, that protecting the company meant protecting everyone in it, even the CEO's daughter. But loyalty starts to rot when it isn't mutual. 3 days before my trip across continents, I opened a shared drive to finalize our pitch materials for the Trident deal. These were the slides I'd been refining for weeks. Charts, analytics, proposal structure, all laid out with precision. There they were, perfect exactly how I'd left them, except for one detail. The document properties listed the author as Mallory Hart. At first I thought it was a mistake. Maybe she had downloaded them and accidentally saved over. But as I clicked through the deck, I realized she had made subtle edits, rephrasing bullet points, adjusting the layout slightly, but keeping my entire structure intact. The bones were mine, the pitch was mine, the name on it wasn't. She hadn't even bothered to notify me. That night, I sat in my apartment with the city lights glowing just beyond the window. I stared at the slide deck until the lines blurred. And then I did something I wasn't proud of. I closed it. I didn't confront her. I didn't message Grayson. I didn't tell a soul. Because deep down, I already knew what would happen. They'd dismiss it as collaboration. They'd say I was imagining things. Worse, they'd think I was being territorial or emotional. That word always came up when a woman questioned power. So I said nothing. I packed my bags. I finalized my flight routes. And I told myself it didn't matter. But it did. Because the hurt wasn't loud. It didn't explode. It seeped in slowly. Every time someone praised her strategic clarity. Every time I sat in a meeting and watched her recite my words like they were hers. I had protected her, covered for her, saved her reputation. And now she was erasing mine. I've never been one to panic. Not when deals collapse. Not when executives melt down in boardrooms. And certainly not when my own future begins to shift beneath my feet. So when I realized the promotion wasn't coming, when I saw Mallory's name on my slides and felt the weight of erasure pressing in, I didn't yell. I didn't storm out. I pivoted quietly, strategically. The truth was, I had already started building the parachute 6 months earlier. Not because I expected betrayal, but because experience had taught me. Power respects leverage, not loyalty. Venturon didn't always look the way it did now. When I joined, it was scrappy, still climbing toward mid-tier status, full of sharp minds and real ambition over time. As investors poured in and politics took root, the soul of the company shifted. Grayson stopped hiring the best candidates and started promoting the safest. The innovation team was gutted. Compliance was weaponized. And anyone with independent ideas was gradually frozen out. Many of those people were my friends. Some were mentors. All of them, like me, had quietly kept building, just no longer for Venturon. I called the project Travanta. No splashy pitch deck, no seed round fanfare. Just a name, a legal structure, and a growing team of former engineers, product strategists, and compliance specialists who understood the pain of being left behind by the very machine they helped create. Every part of Travanta was designed to correct the exact things Venturon had broken: agility instead of bureaucracy, transparency instead of control. And above all, client-centered thinking. We didn't announce it. We didn't need to. It wasn't a revenge company. It was a future waiting to be activated. Still, I kept it quiet. I was still under contract, still earning their trust, and I had no intention of burning a bridge unless someone else lit the match first. That moment came sooner than I expected. It was during a long dinner in Sao Paulo, seated across from Luaz Mata, the CEO of Brazil Inc., one of the 3 legacy firms in the Trident deal. We'd just completed our 3rd round of proposal fine-tuning, and he was nursing a glass of whiskey. His tie loosened the pressure of billion-dollar decisions momentarily off his shoulders. He looked at me, serious, quiet, and asked a question I wasn't prepared for. "What would it take for you to lead instead of follow?" I paused, fork halfway to my mouth. He continued, "You don't speak like an employee." You speak like someone who built something from the ground up. So why aren't you running the company? I laughed gently because someone else inherited it. He smiled, but didn't laugh. But if you ever decide to change that, call me. Some of us prefer to back leaders, not logos. That moment stuck with me, not because it was flattering, though it was, but because it mirrored everything I'd been trying to ignore. Clients could sense it. They felt the gap between the person doing the work and the people taking the credit. They saw the same things I did: the political appointments, the weakened innovation, the strange silences after strong results. And they were watching me, waiting. When I returned to New York, I didn't tell anyone what Luis had said. I didn't tell them about the side calls I'd begun receiving from Telnova's procurement director, or the subtle inquiries from Eurocom's legal team about alternative partnership models. But I did expand Trovanta's charter. I scheduled quiet meetings with my core group former legal lead, Jenna Park systems architect Raheem Silva, and ex-finance strategist Noah Tan. We didn't use company emails. We didn't meet in offices. We met in apartments over dinner on encrypted channels. Every piece was falling into place. Venturon thought I was there closer, but I had already started something they couldn't see: a company that didn't need to close deals with power, but with purpose. If anyone had walked into the executive ballroom without context, they would have thought it was a coronation. Gold linens, crystal chandeliers, a live quartet. The company had spared no expense for the Strategic Growth Gala, which in reality was a celebration of Mallory Hart's sudden promotion to Vice President of International Strategy. The irony was hard to swallow. I had built that department literally from scratch back when it was just me working from 3 time zones out of a suitcase trying to convince European partners that Venturon wasn't just another over-promising tech firm back when the idea of international strategy was considered too ambitious for a mid-tier company barely holding its domestic ground. I had carved that path with grit, late-night flights, and fluency in 6-letter acronyms. And now I was standing under a chandelier, smiling through my teeth, holding a champagne glass I hadn't sipped from, pretending to toast the woman who had taken my title, my team, and my narrative. Mallory was radiant. Of course, blonde, blowout, sleek, navy sheath dress, speaking points rehearsed to perfection. She clinked glasses with board members and dropped buzzwords like multilateral integration and cross-border scalability, while the PR team captured it all. "Thank you all," she said, lifting her glass. "It's an honor to take on this role and continue the strategic vision our company has pioneered." I stood behind her, half in the spotlight, half in the shadow. No mention of my name, not a single reference to the deals I had just closed in Tokyo or the negotiation frameworks I had drafted. Jenna Park, my former legal partner, and now secretly one of Trovanta's founding team, brushed past and whispered behind her glass, "This is surreal." Surreal was generous. People I had worked alongside for years now avoided eye contact. A few of the more decent ones offered awkward half smiles, the kind that said, "I know this is wrong, but I also want to keep my job." Grayson took the mic toward the end. Still tall, still smug in his perfectly tailored suit, he had the kind of voice that could sell sincerity to a room full of cynics. "We've watched Mallory grow into this role," he began, "and I can think of no one better to lead our most important initiative yet, our global expansion through the Trident Partnership." I froze. The room clapped. Then he turned slightly and added, "And she'll be shadowing Maureen on the upcoming trip as part of that transition. Shadowing me as if I was a mentor, as if I had agreed to train the woman who'd taken the title, meant for me in a department I'd built. On a deal I was about to close after 10 months of grinding across time zones." I felt my stomach twist. I wanted to laugh or scream or throw my champagne into the ice sculpture shaped like a globe. Instead, I nodded. I even managed a smile trained and sharp. People clapped again, and I pretended the sound wasn't nails against glass inside my skull. But inside, humiliation burned like acid beneath my skin. Not because they replaced me, but because they expected me to help her do it. Gracefully, quietly, like a good soldier who knew when to disappear. I took a slow breath and sipped the champagne for the first time. It was flat. Mallory turned and leaned in, all warmth and performance. "I hope we'll have time to talk through the Sao Paulo structure before the meetings. I'm still trying to catch up on some of the European details." "You should," I said calmly. "They tend to ask tough questions." "Oh," she giggled. "Well, I'll just point them to you. You always know what to say." I smiled, the kind of smile that comes right before the drawbridge lifts, because I already knew she wouldn't be going. They didn't know it yet, but I'd already booked a second itinerary, One that didn't include her or Grayson or anyone from the company that had just buried my name under a job title with a fresh coat of lipstick. By the time I landed in Tokyo, I hadn't slept properly in 4 days. The gala, the fake congratulations, Mallory's smug request to walk through the Sao Paulo structure, Grayson's backhanded announcement, all of it had worn me down to the bone. But none of that mattered now, because what waited on the other side of each customs gate was something far bigger than my bruised ego, the Trident deal. 3 legacy telecom firms, Telnova in Tokyo, Eurocom in London, and Brazilink in Sao Paulo, joining forces in a historic cloud migration. It had taken me 10 months of whispered introductions, cultural navigation, and trust building to get them to the table. Now I had 10 days to close it. 3 cities, 3 continents, no margin for error. In Tokyo, the tension hit immediately. Telnova's CTO Yuki Asano was sharp, skeptical, and direct. You promise security, so do your competitors. Why should we believe you offer more than words? He asked this before the tea even hit the table. I pulled up the encryption spec sheet I'd designed with Venturon's internal engineers, a document the board hadn't even reviewed yet. I walked him through the exact protocols we'd customized for multi-jurisdictional compliance. Real-time redundancy, zero-trust architecture. When I finished, he didn't smile, he simply nodded. I see why they send you, he said. The others they speak, but they do not understand. After the meeting, we shared a brief walk to his car. I paused, then asked softly, and if there were a leaner model, same tech stack, but fewer layers between need and delivery? Yuki turned his head. You mean less Venturon, something like that? He didn't respond. But when he got into the car, he looked back and said, send the materials again privately. In London, Eurocom's legal team was warier. The Brexit regulatory shifts had made compliance a nightmare, and Venturon's standard contract language was riddled with ambiguities. I'd flagged it before. They hadn't fixed it, so I fixed it myself. At 11:40 that night, sitting in a tiny flat I'd rented for 2 nights, I rewrote the terms using my own templates, ones we developed quietly through Travanta's counsel. Jenna Park. The next morning, I handed the updated drafts across the polished table at Eurocom's headquarters. The GC, a no-nonsense woman named Linda Clark, raised an eyebrow. This isn't the Venturon standard, she said. It's the one that works, I replied. Unless you prefer a 3-week delay and 50 red lines. She skimmed the top page. You did this, yes, off the record. Linda smiled. Well, maybe next time we negotiate, you'll be sitting on this side of the table. I felt something flicker inside me. She wasn't just impressed, she was suggesting something. Wondering out loud why I wasn't already the one leading the company I claimed to represent. And she wasn't the only one. By the time I landed in Sao Paulo, I was running on caffeine and willpower. The Brazilink meeting was the final leg. Financial structure, revenue share model, data sovereignty, all the red flags in one room. And worse, Mallory was supposed to be there, supposed to shadow me. She didn't come. I knew she wouldn't. I had changed the itinerary last minute, rerouting myself through Argentina, ensuring no internal team could track my movements in real time. Venturon thought I was flying in a day later. I was already on the ground, already working. The meeting with CEO Luis Mata lasted 4 hours. He grilled me on risk thresholds, capital exposure, and long-term support models. When I held firm on the numbers the board had fought me on, he finally leaned back and exhaled. I trust you, Marine, he said, tapping the table. But I don't trust Venturon. You know that, right? I do. So if this falls apart later, it won't. He looked at me carefully. Unless you leave. That's when I leaned in. And if there were a way, I said, keeping my voice low for you to get this deal without that risk, without the politics, the noise, the bottlenecks, would you be open? Luis didn't blink. You know the answer to that. 3 cities, 3 meetings, 3 quiet seeds planted, and in each one the same pattern: skepticism toward Venturon, trust toward me, not the logo me. I carried the weight of the company across hemispheres, across time zones, across fatigue. I answered questions before they were asked, rewrote contracts on my own time, and stood between billion-dollar doubts and billion-dollar commitments. But I wasn't just closing a deal. I was opening a door. The cabin lights dimmed just as we crossed the equator. I had been staring out the window, the vast darkness below stretching endlessly. When I opened my laptop to review the Sao Paulo meeting notes one more time, the contract summary was pristine. The numbers matched. The client was in. The deal was done. It should have been the proudest moment of my career. Instead, the screen glitched. The internal server booted me out. I tried again. Access denied. I clicked into Slack. Session expired. My company calendar disappeared. My Outlook went blank. Then an email. Subject: termination notification. Effective immediately. Sender Grayson Hart. I read the first line and my chest tightened like a vice. Marin, effective immediately. Your employment with Venturin Technologies is terminated. All credentials and accesses have been revoked in accordance with HR protocol. Please refrain from engaging with any company clients or partners moving forward. No salutation, no gratitude, no explanation. Just a knife slid quietly between the ribs 35,000 feet in the air. For a moment, I sat completely still. The flight attendants moved quietly down the aisle, collecting half-empty wine glasses from the late-night service. Around me, the other business travelers slept beneath beige blankets, blissfully unaware. My laptop screen blinked again, this time going black. They'd locked me out of everything. I reached for my phone, same result. VPN blocked credentials invalid. Even my internal contacts list was gone. They had erased me. No warning, no meeting, no chance to defend my role. This wasn't a restructuring. This was an execution, and the insult cut deeper than the decision itself. They didn't even wait until I landed. They didn't have the decency to look me in the eye. They fired me in silence while I was midair alone after closing the biggest deal in company history. I should have felt rage and maybe in some distant corner of my gut. I did, but mostly I felt insulted not because they let me go, but because they thought I was disposable, replaceable, powerless. They fired me like someone who hadn't just carried their entire international growth strategy on her back. They thought cutting access would cut control. They thought that revoking my email would revoke my influence. They thought I had no backup. They were wrong. 6 weeks earlier, long before Grayson's quiet power plays, before Mallory's fake promotion, I'd followed protocol and initiated a private backup of my Trident deal notes. The legal team had approved it as a precaution standard for high-risk deals conducted across borders and languages. I had it all: the pitch decks, contract versions, financial modeling, call transcripts, even handwritten client feedback. They said I had no right to engage with clients. They forgot. I was the only reason those clients were still engaged at all. I reached under the seat, pulled out the matte black laptop I never synced to Venturin systems, and placed it on the tray table. It hummed quietly to life, encrypted offline, untouchable. The wallpaper glowed in the dark cabin light, a simple logo, half-finished Trevanta. I opened the encrypted folder. Everything was there. Each market strategy, every clause in every version of every contract, secure, legally sound, mine. The fury finally flickered, but not as fire as resolve. Grayson hadn't just fired me, he'd freed me. They thought cutting me loose midair would break me, but all it did was cut the rope holding me back. I opened a clean document, placed my hands on the keyboard, and typed 3 simple words: "Let's begin." Then I closed the lid and leaned back outside the window. The sky was still pitch black, but for the first time in months, I saw a clear horizon. The city looked the same from the back seat of the taxi. I watched the skyline crawl past steel and glass towers, soaking in late morning sun-yellow cabs, weaving in and out pedestrians rushing with coffees and phones like nothing had changed. But for me, everything had shifted. It was 8:40 a.m. when we pulled up to the Venturin headquarters. I paused before getting out, staring at the building I'd entered almost every day for the last 9 years. It looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I was just seeing it differently now. Less as home, more as a place that never truly belonged to me as I stepped into the marble-floored lobby. The security guard, Daniel, who used to wave me in with a grin, froze. "Ms. Blake," he said, shifting awkwardly. I wasn't told you'd be coming in today. I wasn't told I wouldn't be," I said calmly, holding up my badge. I pressed it against the gate. Nothing. Red light. Access denied. Daniel winced. "I'm really sorry, it's just HR flagged the system this morning." I nodded. I didn't argue. It wasn't his fault. He looked more uncomfortable than I did. But as I stood there, half in and half out of the place I had given the best years of my life, to a strange feeling washed over me. Not rage, not grief, just displacement. Like I was a ghost haunting a life that no longer existed. I waited for the elevator anyway. The receptionist didn't greet me. She barely looked up. Someone else had taken my name off the board outside the 27th floor meeting room. The digital display now read, Strategic Integration VP M. Hart. By the time I reached my old floor, the silence felt surgical. Every familiar face seemed to avoid eye contact. The junior analysts who used to greet me with eager updates stared into screens. One even stood up and quietly walked toward the break room the moment I stepped out of the elevator. No welcome, no question, no curiosity. My desk was already stripped bare. The plants I'd kept alive through jet lag and budget cuts were gone. The framed client thank you letter from Eurocom vanished. Even my chair had been replaced with a newer one, the tag still hanging from the back. I stood there for a moment, staring at the vacant surface where my entire professional identity had once lived. My nameplate had been removed on a table nearby. I spotted a copy of the internal newsletter. The headline read, "Mallory Hart to lead Trident Partnership in Global Expansion Push." I picked it up and scanned the article. Following Marin Blake's transition out of the company VP, Mallory Hart will assume full control of the Trident client integration strategy. Transition, a sanitized word for what had happened. No acknowledgement of the woman who had built the deal, flown across 3 continents to negotiate it, or personally salvaged 2 of the 3 contracts from collapse. I dropped the newsletter into the trash. Then I left back on the street. The city felt louder than before, the honks sharper, the air colder. People bustled past, and none of them knew or cared that I had just been erased. I walked a few blocks to the old hotel I used to use between international flights. They knew me there. No one asked questions. They gave me a room on the 15th floor overlooking the river. I closed the curtains, took off my shoes, sat on the edge of the bed, and for the first time in days, I allowed myself to feel it, the hollow space. Not grief, not defeat, but the realization that the place I had poured myself into had never truly seen me. They had used my brain, my voice, my presence, and now, with the stroke of a keycard and a press release, I had been deleted like a line in an outdated spreadsheet. But I wasn't broken. I was free. I pulled out my laptop, not the one they shut down, the other one, the Black Maddie machine that still held the future I had started designing in secrecy. I opened the secure client portal Jenna and Rahim had helped build. The encryption was flawless, clean ready. I clicked open the contact list: Louise Matayuki, Asano, Linda Clark, and then without hesitation I sent 3 emails. Each one had only 4 words. The door's open. The morning after I sent the 3 emails, I sat in silence with a black coffee, a croissant I had no appetite for, and my laptop open beside me. The room was quiet. No celebration, no champagne, no inbox overload, just stillness, but not the stillness of nothingness. The stillness before the shift, like the sky before a storm. I knew what would be happening back at Venturon. Grayson would have walked into the Monday morning executive meeting already on edge. Maybe his assistant would have handed him a printed update about the Trident accounts, except this time there would be no forward momentum, no eager messages from the clients, no check-in notes from my side because I was no longer on their side, and neither, it seemed, were the clients. According to Jenna, who still had friends embedded in legal, Grayson placed the first call to Yuki Asano at 9:15 a.m. No answer. He tried again 20 minutes later, nothing. By 10 o'clock a.m., he looped in Mallory and the interim strategic team. They attempted Eurocom next. Linda Clark had always been responsive, direct, efficient, the kind of person who replies to emails within the hour and doesn't tolerate delay. That morning, the line rang 7 times before going to voicemail. At 10:40 a.m., a follow-up email was sent to her office address, a second to her legal team. Both bounced back out of office. Please direct all Trident-related inquiries to your current point of contact, except they didn't know who that was anymore. By 11:30 a.m., the panic had set in. They called Bracelink. Louise Matta's assistant answered and said he was unavailable. Unavailable today, Grayson asked. No, she replied calmly. Unavailable for Venturon. He didn't know what to say. He demanded an explanation, but none came. Instead, the line went dead back in my hotel suite. I refreshed the client dashboard quietly. Trivanta's new portal, built with Rahim's design, tracked every client interaction in encrypted logs. It wasn't just smart. It was invisible. No public launch, no flashy announcement, just clean, secure, human-first onboarding. All 3 clients had signed into the system within the hour after my message. Each of them had scheduled exploratory sessions with the Trivanta team. Nothing dramatic. Just quiet steps toward transition. It was all happening without noise, without confrontation, no lawsuits, no threats. Just silence. The kind that speaks volumes. The kind of silence that tells you everything you need to know about who still holds the conversation and who has lost it entirely. Venturon wasn't being attacked. It was being ignored. And for a company like that, silence wasn't absence. It was a verdict. Around 1:00 p.m., Grayson tried one last move. He had someone from investor relations reach out to all 3 client firms, publicly framing it as a consolidation update and requesting joint press statements to confirm Venturon's continued leadership on the Trident project. Only one of them replied. It was a short message. No greeting, no signature block. Venturon no longer speaks for us, you do. I stared at the words on my screen for a long time. They were simple, unpolished, but they held more weight than any title Venturon had ever given me. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I stood and walked toward the floor-to-ceiling window. The city pulsed beneath me, unaware of the quiet unraveling taking place 32 floors above where I used to sit. The place that fired me without a voice was now losing deals in a language they no longer understood. Not loud, not public, just gone. Jenna called that evening. "They're scrambling," she said. "Mallory's panicking. Grayson thinks you're behind it all. But no one can prove anything. The clients won't return any of their calls." "They don't need to," I replied. "Are you sure you don't want to, make a statement, go public?" I looked at the glowing monitor. At the new Trivanta homepage, Rahim had just published. It didn't say my name anywhere. No founder section, no about me. Just the logo, a line of code in the footer, and a promise. "What we build belongs to those who build it." "No," I said softly. "Let them sit in the silence a while longer." Because this wasn't revenge. This was clarity delivered without noise. And it was only just beginning at 9:30 a.m. The press release went live. No flashing banners, no launch event, no breathless LinkedIn threads. Just a simple, elegant announcement published directly through Trivanta's media relations portal, distributed quietly, purposefully, and irreversibly. Trivanta Inc. is proud to announce a multi-continent strategic partnership with Telnova Eurocom and Brazil Inc. The agreement, valued at $1.5 billion over 7 years, will deliver secure modular cloud integration across 3 regions, redefining global enterprise connectivity. For media inquiries, please contact Press at Trivanta. Tech signed, Marin Blake, CEO. That was it. No mention of Venturon, no fanfare, just precision and presence. The emails started trickling in by 10 o'clock a.m., not from my former colleagues, from journalists, analysts, VC scouts, people who had never heard the name Trivanta before this morning, people who now wanted to know how a company with no website until last week had just pulled off the most seamless acquisition of 3 legacy clients in a single stroke. By 10:45 a.m., the first trade article went live, then 2 more, then 6. By 11:15 a.m., TechWatch Global posted a headline that made me lean back in my chair, take a slow sip of tea, and smile. "The silent takeover, who is Trivanta, and why is everyone at Venturon panicking?" Back inside Venturon's glass tower, silence turned to chaos. Mallory had locked herself in the conference room with 3 of the junior comms managers, her voice rising just barely through the soundproof walls. Jenna had sent me a text from legal. They're trying to write a counter-statement. Grayson wants to blame external sabotage. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say, nothing to argue. Grayson hadn't been sabotaged. He had simply been outmaneuvered. The thing about building power quietly is that no one sees it coming until it's already done. They don't know where it started or how far it spread, they just know suddenly they're not in control anymore. That was the difference between noise and clarity. Venturon had noise, I had clarity. By 12:20 p.m., Financial Chronicle called the move the boldest silent shift in enterprise tech since the Altivix pivot of 2011. By 1:15 p.m., Trivanta's inbox had over 70 partnership requests and investor meeting invitations, none of which we accepted, not yet, not until the foundation was fully sealed. Meanwhile, the clients Yuki, Linda, Louise stayed utterly silent. Not one press quote, not one explanatory tweet. They had no reason to explain. They had simply chosen differently, and they had chosen me. Rahim walked into the hotel suite around 2 o'clock p.m., with a bottle of non-alcoholic champagne and a printed copy of the press release, like we were old-school startup founders. "You gonna frame this?" he asked, grinning. "I might tattoo it instead," I replied. He handed me a manila folder. Also, financials, they're already transferring implementation budgets to the accounts. Jenna triple-checked everything, no hang-ups. I nodded and exhaled, not with relief, with recognition. This wasn't luck, this was designed. Every move had been deliberate. Every conversation planted, every client nurtured. I hadn't taken Venturon's clients. I had earned their trust while Venturon was too busy promoting power plays and empty titles. Later that evening, I got a short voicemail from a number I recognized but hadn't saved, Grayson. I played it once, then deleted it before it finished. He didn't yell. He didn't plead. He just asked the same question they all ask when they finally realize what they've lost. Was this personal? Of course it was. It was also professional, it was strategic, it was overdue. I stood by the window that night overlooking the city. The skyline no longer felt cold, it felt earned. They had taken everything with noise. I had taken everything back in silence. No announcement, no vengeance speech, just a name. On a page, Marin Blake CEO and the world watching, not because I demanded it, but because the results spoke louder than anything I could have said. The conference room at the Global Tech Summit in Munich was lined with deep blue velvet curtains and polished glass tables, luxury masking desperation. At 9:00 a.m., Grayson Hart stood at the front of room C214, flanked by his newest interim strategy lead and 2 compliance managers in stiff suits. The buzz outside was loud. Venturon had leaked news of a breakthrough partnership with a rising Eastern European cloud firm, hoping to signal recovery after the Trivanta collapse had rocked investor confidence. Only insiders knew the truth. This was not a breakthrough. It was a lifeline, and it was already unraveling. I watched from the back corner as they began setting up the projection screen. My entrance wasn't announced. I didn't need it to be. I had timed it for precision, not spectacle. Grayson paced as he spoke softly with the prospective partner's CEO, a broad-shouldered man named Marek Dvorsky. I had met him once before in Prague over a long dinner where we shared ideas on sovereign cloud hosting. He didn't remember me yet, but he would. At 9:15 a.m., I stepped forward, calm-collected, wearing a slate gray blazer, a simple dress beneath, and confidence stitched into every step. Marek looked up and blinked. Marin Grayson turned. The color left his face so fast I thought he might faint. I walked to the table and extended a hand toward Marek. "It's good to see you again." Marek took it with a firm grip, confused but intrigued. "You're here with—" "I represent Trivanta," I said, "and I'm the other party in this negotiation." Silence rippled through the room like a dropped glass. Grayson's jaw tensed. "This is a closed session, Marin." "No," I said evenly. "This is a joint session. Trivanta was invited after your firm submitted 2 conflicting statements about global rollout capabilities. The summit organizers requested transparency. Full partner alignment." Marek nodded slowly. "The pieces connecting in real time." I opened my folder and laid out Trivanta's infrastructure map. Clean, updated, tailored to Marek's firm's regional expansion plan. Our model was leaner, faster tested. His CTO had already signed off on the specs privately. "Pending this final review, I understand your position," Marek said to Grayson. "But we can't afford another misalignment." "After what happened with Trident," Grayson cut in, "that was sabotage. I didn't flinch. That was foresight. I offered them a choice. They chose clarity over politics." Grayson turned to Marek. "You really want to work with someone who abandons her company mid-deal?" I smiled, sharp, quiet, composed. "I don't abandon ships," I said. "I rebuild them, without the ones who drilled the holes." There was a beat of silence. Then Marek looked at his legal team. "We'll proceed with dual review," he said. "And I want Marine's proposal considered as primary." Grayson stepped back like he'd been hit. I could have ended it there. I could have taken the win quietly and left him to rot in the tension of the room. But I didn't come just for the win. I came for the dignity they took from me. So I looked Grayson in the eye, steady and cold, and said, "One condition." Everyone froze. "I'll proceed with the joint infrastructure, only if you're not involved. I don't deal with people who fire their architects mid-flight." The silence in the room turned heavy. Marek hesitated for just a breath, then nodded. "I respect that." Grayson's face collapsed into itself. For a moment, I saw not a CEO, but a man realizing the game was no longer his to play. He left the room without a word. Outside, Munich streets buzzed with late spring sun and tourists crowding cafe tables. I walked toward a nearby courtyard, where Rahim and Jenna were waiting, both holding coffees, both watching the live feed from the summit on their phones. "Heard you dropped a bomb," Jenna smirked. "No bombs," I said, sitting beside them, just balance restored. Rahim raised his cup. To the architect. I didn't raise mine. I wasn't finished yet. But for the first time in years, I felt like my name didn't need defending. Because I had walked into the room they tried to shut me out of and made it mine at 7:45 a.m. I walked into the Trivanta headquarters as the morning sun poured through the tall windows, casting long lines of light across the clean, polished floors. The space was quiet, but it wasn't cold. It hummed with a kind of calm energy. The kind that only comes from a place built with purpose. On the far wall, A new plaque had just been mounted, etched in brushed steel. It read, Trevanta, founded by Marin Blake. Not tucked in footnotes, not hidden behind team credits, not erased or replaced. Just their full final visible. I stood in front of it for a long moment, fingers lightly brushing the surface, remembering all the times my name had been written in drafts, and then removed before the meeting, all the proposals where I did the work. But someone else presented the slide. All the press releases I edited that never once mentioned my contributions. They had taken so many pieces of my voice for so long, but they never really silenced me. And now I didn't need to raise my voice because the building spoke for me. Back upstairs, I stepped into the boardroom, not the sterile, chrome-heavy kind Venturon used to favor, but one with warm wood, soft lighting, and walls that invited conversation, not domination. Linda Clark from Eurocom sat on one side of the table, reviewing an integration timeline with Rahim. Luiz Mata was on a video call in the corner, laughing about the last soccer match in Brazil. Yuki Asano had sent a gift. 3 bonsai trees to place around the office, one for each continent Trevanta now supported. I sat at the head of the table, but it didn't feel like a throne. It felt like balance. That afternoon, I received a quiet notification on my phone. Mallory Hart had resigned from her position. Effective immediately, no formal statement, no interviews, just a single line in the industry trades. Sources say the company is undergoing a shift in leadership structure following the collapse of several major partnerships. No one asked where she went. No one really cared. An hour later, another notification came through. Grace and Hart removed from the Venturon board by unanimous vote. There was no scandal, no lawsuit, no meltdown on camera, just removal. A slow, quiet unraveling that mirrored exactly how they had tried to erase me. Only now. They were the ones disappearing, without sound, without legacy, without anyone fighting to preserve their place. And me, I didn't cheer, I didn't celebrate, because this had never been about revenge. It had always been about something simpler, more sacred reclamation. When I signed the final consolidated contract, later that day, a joint agreement unifying all 3 Trident partners under one multi-regional architecture, I didn't hesitate. I didn't think of the $1.5 billion. I didn't think of the headlines or the vindication. I just thought of my name, Marin Blake, and how, for the first time, I was signing as exactly who I was. No fear, no disguise, no delusion. I was no longer someone waiting to be recognized. I was remembered by default, because this time, the foundation had my name carved into the frame. If you've ever had your name removed from a project you bled for, if you've ever stayed silent while someone else got the credit, if you've ever been told to let it go, when what they really meant was let yourself go, then hear this. You're not invisible, you're not replaceable, and you're not done. Some battles don't need fire to win. They need focus. They need stillness. They need time. And when the time comes, let your presence speak louder than your pain. If Marin's journey struck something in you, if you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or erased, don't stay silent. Like this video, leave a comment and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories where the quiet ones rise, hit subscribe. We're just getting started.